Hi everybody, welcome to the April webinar. We're super excited about today. We're going to be walking through several different strategies on how to work on your grants, your RFAs for the next month. I, of course, am Amanda Flannery, the CECC coordinator for the Governor's Office of Early Childhood, and I have with me Joe Roberts, and we will be walking you guys through some exciting things, basically taking a lot of what you learned at the Institute and putting it all together in one to show you what we were hoping that you would learn then. So we're going to do a quick review.
If you're having some issues, Patty Singleton is here with us from HDI, and she is our guru. So if you are having some issues, feel free to use the left-hand side chat, and you can Patty will try to provide some technical assistance to you as we go. Looks like we're having a few folks with some dial-in issues. Please know, too, that we are recording this as we record all of ours, and I think everybody's kind of aware now that we catalog those on the website. So it's a matter of you can always come back and reference this and other webinars that we've done in the past through our website, which is kidsnow.ky.gov.
Okay, so what we're going to do is a quick review of what we went over in the RFA overview, the required components, things that, excuse me, haven't really changed since last year. Then we're going to take a long discussion on how to submit a high-quality application, specifically what we're looking for, and what our reviewers will be looking for as they review your applications this year. We have put together an example that we're going to be walking through on how to take a look at your early childhood profile to determine what you need to do and for your strategic plan and how the budget and budget justification all fits in. And we're also going to be taking technical assistance and support in the chat box if you have any questions.
So the impetus for kind of what we've done today is that many of you we know attended the Institute that we held back in last month in Somerset. And in that there were several sessions where we focused on this year's RFA. Amanda and I did sort of a 101 or an introduction to this year's RFA, and I kind of went over the details of what was changed, what didn't change. We didn't go into a lot of detail on that. There wasn't a real deep dive because Amanda did, as those of you that were there, Amanda went and kind of did a deeper dive on some of the issues or some of the more specific examples around writing the RFA. And then Elizabeth Whitehouse and I also did a pretty in-depth session on the early childhood profile. What we built for you guys today is sort of a hybrid of all three of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to just sort of breeze over some of the required components, not to say that they're not important, but we're not going to really focus on those today. But what we are going to focus on is looking at the quality components of your application. So how you use data to recognize needs, how that translates that into your strategic plan, and then how you develop a budget to basically support your activities.
So you guys have seen this slide before. We're taking a look at things that might possibly need to be adjusted from last year. We decided to be a little bit more responsive. We knew that the early childhood profiles were coming out, which was going to help you guys out a lot. Working to develop new resources with the school readiness definition and the parent guides. We also wanted to focus a little bit more on being intentional and deliberate in the choices that we were making for activities in the communities, and also, consistently involving, strengthening the collaboration in your communities, making sure that you have the right partners at the table, that the resources that you have are going to be there for you when you need them.
So we're all in our office. We're always trying to make this process as easy as we can, but also supporting a high level of quality in the work that you do to prepare all the kids in your community for school success and beyond. So what we learned, we kind of shared this with you at the Institute, but what we want to do is share this with everyone again for the purposes of these are some of the things that we as staff recognized from last year's submissions for applications. We noticed that there were some trends that we want to make you aware of, so that anybody can avoid these for this year's application submission. So last year, there were a couple things that we noted that there were little hanging points that prevented some of the councils from submitting the highest quality application possible. And one of those were the required components. Now, again, we're not going to hit those real heavy today, but we want you to understand that the required components are exactly that. They are all required. So as you're going down, as you're preparing your applications, make sure you use the checklist, and don't forget to send us one of the required components, because what happens is whenever we don't have a required component, then that application is put into a status where we have to resubmit it. So we just want you to avoid that. In some cases, council sent in an application that didn't, for example, have the entire list of members on there, or their email addresses, or their phone numbers. That's a very simple thing, but that automatically puts that application into a status where it would have to be resubmitted. You'd have to make the correction to include the required component, and then you have to resubmit it. So let's just make sure that as we're developing that you have a checklist that's in the RFA. This year's RFA, the appendices, has a checklist that you can utilize to make sure that you're getting all of those required components in. Another thing that we noticed from last year's applications was that high-quality applications were very detailed in their descriptions of what their activities were and what outcomes that they had selected, and really had a lot of detail around how they were going to affect school readiness in their own community. We certainly want to encourage this. When you're developing your strategic plan, for example, that's your opportunity to give reviewers the detail that's necessary for them to make a judgment whether you have written a high-quality application. Can you actually do, for example, what you say that you're doing? So don't take anything for granted. What we said at the Institute, what we'll echo here, is as you're preparing your applications, kind of get into the mind of the reviewer. If they have to ask questions, or they feel like that if you're a reviewer and you're kind of haven't asked questions, or there's not enough detail, then that's going to probably affect the way that reviewer will score your application. Now listen, I want to reiterate this as well. We're not grading on grammar. We're not grading on spelling. We're asking that you use some formatting just to make it simple. But really, in your descriptions, don't take anything for granted as far as saying, we're going to do perhaps a literacy fair because we want to give families an opportunity to learn together, and when families learn together, then that's how we're going to improve school readiness. You have to be very deliberate in your description because the reviewer may or may not have a great deal of early childhood experience. From the template standpoint, we have really, Amanda and the team have provided lots of different templates on our website. There's a toolkit that's available through our website at kidsnow.ky.gov. For those of you that haven't seen it, there's all kinds of examples and templates that you can use from a budget standpoint to a needs assessment all the way through. We really encourage you to use these templates because our point there is, even though you're not going to be marked off if you don't choose to use them, it just makes it simpler in the process of grading or scoring your application in the minds of the reviewer. So when you're submitting your application, we strongly suggest that you use the templates because that way the reviewers are going to have a very clear and concise picture and not have to look for the information. And then finally, the MOU process. That was one thing. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to do so much with your application as it does with the process to get paid. So following the MOU process, which is outlined in this year's RFA, is critical. That way we can make sure that we get you paid on a timely basis and that you don't have any lapse in the funding.
So just to go over some of the compliance components really quickly, most of the stuff you guys already know. If you do have questions on it, please visit our frequently asked questions page on the website. A lot of folks have already asked questions that may help you when you're going through your compliance components. The physical agency must be a government agency. The administrative costs must not exceed 5%. The end-of-year reporting, which we're hoping to get out really soon. Multiple applications for one service area, both would be not considered. Make sure you have that list of members, the letters of commitment, those conflict of interest forms, which we talked about quite a bit at the Institute, and making sure that you have all your required members as dictated by the RFA. Now, To move a little bit more into what we're specifically going to be talking about today is as I said, we're going to take an example of the early childhood profile and analyze it and look at patterns to recognize areas of the greatest need so that then we can move forward and create that strategic plan, which includes selecting your outcomes and identifying your activities, putting your plan together, making sure that you're getting the data back for your outcomes, and how that all relates back to school readiness. And then finally, using your budget and your budget justification to identify the resources that you have and allocating those resources and support activities with the funding that you'll receive from us.
So these are really the quality components of your application, and this is the meat of your application. So you have the required components. That's kind of what we can breeze over. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call, pick up the phone call, email Amanda, take a look at our frequently asked questions if you have questions about those required components, because we're not really going to talk, again, we're not going to talk about that today. We really want to get into detail on the quality components of your applications, not the compliance, but the quality components. And really go walk through an example here with this case study of a fictional county that we've kind of made up, of how the needs assessment, the strategic plan, and the budget all work together so that you can submit the highest quality application possible to us so we know what your plan is for the funding this year. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the early childhood profile. So if you have not got a profile in front of you, you may want to take the opportunity to pull that up for one of your counties or the county that your service area is in, so that you can kind of walk through your own example, because what we're using today just as a learning tool is we kind of mocked up a early childhood profile of a fictional county to walk you through sort of the process of performing a analysis. Now, we can't start that without talking about some of the data that is on the early childhood profile. For those of you that went to the Institute, that was able to attend the session that Elizabeth Whitehouse and I did, we went into great detail and went over every section of the early childhood profile to give you an idea on what the types of data that are contained in the profile. We're going to do that today, too, in detail, walking through this case study. But first, I really need to hit you once again with some of the, what I'll call, gotchas of the data. This is information that you need to know so that you can put the data in appropriate context when you're making your decisions. The first thing I want to go over is some of the terminology, in particular around the school readiness data, the Brigance screener results. The terminology that is used on the early childhood profile and on the Brigance screen clearly states places children into three distinct categories: ready with supports, ready, and then ready with, I believe it's enrichments. I have enhancements on my slide here, but I believe it's enrichments. That's very deliberately done. All children in Kentucky are eligible for kindergarten under one criteria only, and that is age. So the results from the Brigance screen cannot be used to prohibit a child from entering kindergarten if they are age eligible. So let me say that one more time. The results of the Brigance screen cannot be used to prohibit entry into kindergarten for a child if they are age eligible. It's simply meant to be a guide for educators, the community, for community early childhood councils, to see where their children are, or see where the children in the community are in aggregate, so that they can guide the support that they may need to see to it that more kids are ready or ready with enrichments. When you look at the domain level scoring, then, the terminology changes. If you look at, for example, literacy and communication, you'll note that the lexicon changes to below average and above average. So it's very important to know the difference between these terminologies. The second thing is you have to have an understanding of how the school districts that participated in the pilot implemented the Brigance screener for last year. There's a number of variables that you need to be aware of. First of all, not all districts participated in the screen. 109 of 176 school districts participated. So on your screen, on your early childhood profile, you may find that you don't have Brigance screener results for your particular county. That's okay. We understand that that's the case, and the early childhood profiles give you a wealth of other information that you can use, and we'll walk through this when we look at our case study. The second thing you need to know is that districts were allowed a degree of flexibility on how they actually administered the Brigance screener to respond to the needs of their own community. So, for example, districts could choose to screen 15 days prior to the start of the school year or 30 days after. Now, that's very important. There also were no restrictions put on where the screen should be done or who the screen should be done by. So let me just build a little bit of a scenario here that if you're working with two school districts and one school district chose to administer the screen 15 days prior to the kindergarten starting by a resource teacher in a kindergarten recruitment event, those results may be different than a district that chose to screen 30 days after in the classroom with the child's teacher administering the actual cognitive portion of the screen. Now, that does not mean that the data is wrong. It just means that you have to understand and be able to put into the appropriate context what you're looking at so that you understand the differences that you may see. The other part is that you'll see on this early childhood profile, which we'll look at in just a moment, you'll see that there are two different and very distinct reports. There's the composite score, which reports on the overall readiness level of children in your particular county or in a particular county. And then second, you'll see the domain level scoring. What is important to note is that the composite score that you're looking at only contains the cognitive portions of the test. So only the portions of the test that excludes, what it excludes is it excludes the social, emotional, and the self-help. That's reported using a different tool, so therefore that didn't go into the composite score. Again, it's important for you to know these differences as we move forward. Then also on the early childhood profile, there are some cohort differences. And what I mean by cohort differences is some of the data that is reported is the results from last year or the results as the end of last school year, whereas some of the other data is the current school year. So you're going to see some differences that may not add up to somebody who's a layman or looking at it for the first time. You may expect that there are some things that should add up that they may in fact not because you're looking at two different time periods, and that's what I mean by cohorts. Okay, so now that we got all that out of the way, what we basically want to do now is with fictional Stewart County here, we want to actually walk through how you might use the early childhood profile to conduct your community needs to find the areas of greatest need. So on the screen now, you're looking at the front page of Stewart County's early childhood profile. And again, I really encourage you at this stage, if you can, go grab one of your own county's profiles so that we can kind of follow along. What we're looking for here is patterns. We want to look at the data as a whole so that we can notice some of the patterns that we may see that indicates areas of need. So as you're looking at your profile, what you may want to look at, for example, first, is take a look at the results of the Brigance screen. The Brigance screen that you're looking at now, it shows you that this district did indeed participate in the pilot year because they screened 327 kids. Now, you may want to compare that to the number down at the bottom that is last year's now. This is the cohort difference. Last year's results for how many kids enrolled in kindergarten. So you're looking at, say, 327 versus 322. What that may tell you is, hey, look, we had good coverage. This district fully participated in the Brigance screen. So you can know then that there is an opportunity for you to say, look, we got results on all the kids. Second, you may want to go back and continuing to look at the results. Look at the individual domain results versus the overall composite score. Note where there are strengths and there are strengths and opportunities for improvement. So as I'm looking at Stewart County here, I'm noticing that in the first two domains, in the cognitive and general knowledge domain and in the language and communication domain, both of the county results fall below the state averages. State averages are in purple. The individual county results are in blue. So that may be something that you take a look at later to say, hey, wait a minute, this might be an area that we could affect school readiness because we may want to affect an outcome on one or both of these domains. Next, kind of take a look at the highlights section. This is very important demographic information. Now look, this information has been available in various forms for some time. But this is the first time that it's been laid out in this way, and every piece of data that was finalized on for this early childhood profiles is meant to be actionable by a community early childhood council in some way. So if you take a look at the numbers on the highlight section, you'll be able to see the number of children. First of all, the number of children under 5 that are in your county, or in this particular county. And then you can look at all the different levels of where the children are as far as 200% of poverty versus 100% of poverty. This should give you an idea of sort of the children that are at the most risk, so that when you're designing when you're trying to decide on an outcome that you want to affect, this may be your target population. You can actually, if you kind of, nobody wants to do math in public here, but if you can kind of look at the number versus how many children are in the state-funded pre-K versus Head Start, versus how many child care slots there are, you should be able to get very close to, are we reaching the children who are eligible? They also want to take a look and note, for example, the number of families that are in the HANDS program. That may be an underutilized resource in your particular county. It may or it may not. Again, all of these results are going to be different, and your analysis is going to be different for each one of the counties. Moving along then and trying to find the patterns here that we're looking at, let's flip over to the back side now of the profile, and we're looking at completely different, or we're looking at another set of information. So what we've got is looking at the STARS program. This may be another way. So in fictional Stewart County here, we notice that you do have some programs participating in STARS, but not a lot. That may be another area where you want to focus. You may want to say, well, let's do a STARS awareness program, or let's perhaps let's have an activity or try to affect an outcome where we're trying to get more people into the STARS program. Or possibly we have examples of councils that have written a strategic plan that is going to try to increase the number of family certified homes that are out there. So the data should drive you in that, and you can compare this data from front to back. That's one of the pieces where you may find those patterns that we're looking for. Looking at the professional development information as well, that you may find that you may note some patterns there. This is where you can use the data off from the flip side and see how many children or how many kids are in your county that may be in an at-risk category versus what are the educational qualifications for the teachers who are teaching them in your county. So you might do something that says, hey, you know what, we recognize, for example, in Stewart County here, no one has a director's credential. That may be something that your council would like to focus on and work with community-based child care providers to say, hey, let's see if we can get you enrolled in a director's credential, or if you notice too on this that they're not taking advantage in Stewart County of the scholarship program. So that may be something that you want to do to work with early childhood educators and institutions and providers in your area to say there's an opportunity to access some scholarship dollars. So you can also look at the family information as well. So this is more like health and family information. These are important indicators. These are important indicators for a couple different reasons. If you were able to join us at the Institute within the data session, the one the one indicator that we did pick out to share was the number of mothers who have births and they don't have a high school diploma. And the reason we picked that out is because that can actually be used as a correlation for later, it correlates directly to later examples such as, are kids more likely or less likely to get in trouble with the law? Are they less likely or more likely? All that can be correlated to mother's educational level at birth. So these are some of the things that you may want to look at. I'm going to pause just for a moment because I do have a question, and I don't want to forget this because it's very important. I have a question on the side that says, how would you suggest counties that have no data create an effective strategic plan? This is a good question because, again, like we said, only 109 of 174 districts actually participated, and that's fine. You have lots more information on the early childhood profiles than just the Brigance data. You can also look at the state averages to get an idea where you think your county may be. So, for example, in Kentucky, it's just a fact, math and literacy are typically low. So that cognitive and general knowledge and literacy and communication is going to be low. And it's going to be low across the state. So you can make some assumptions based on the state averages as well as some of the other domain level scores as well. That would be one way that you could still say, well, we still want to affect these in our county, even though we didn't have, even though our school districts didn't participate in the pilot year. Also, use the other data that's available. Use all the highlights data. Use the health data. You can get to, you don't have to have advanced data to write an effective strategic plan, but as Amanda will tell you in a moment, your strategic plan has to reflect some kind of need. You may use data on the profile. You might actually go out and use data that's on another source. So we're still saying that we certainly are saying that the profiles is a very valuable document to your planning, even though you may not just have the Brigance level data. Finally, you can also take a look at some of the services that that the families are taking advantage of. Oh, let me go back just one moment. Here's one of the connections that you may make. If you're looking at, for example, high instances of teen birth or teen pregnancy, and if you remember on the flip side, only 10 families were participating in the HANDS program, well, that kind of shows a disconnect, right? That shows a pattern. If you have high instances of teen pregnancy but low instances of the HANDS program being accessed or utilized by those moms that should be eligible, that may be something that your council would want to do. And then taking a look at sort of the services that are included, and this will give you an idea of the families that are eligible, are they accessing the services that they're eligible for? So in Stewart County, it looks like they're doing pretty good actually on that. When you look at the number of children that are in the county that are in those at-risk categories and the level at which that they're accessing services. Let me be very, very, very clear on one point. These are all just examples for the purposes of going through an exercise to perform an analysis. We are in no way, shape, or form trying to suggest that you take any one of these examples that we use today as the thing that you should do to affect change in your community. It may be similar, but your community really, the way that you need to express in your strategic plan what outcomes you're affecting has to be tied into the data for your county. Stewart County is obviously just fictional, so we're just kind of doing this in purposes of exercises, but this would be the process that you would go through to determine where the areas of greatest need are. As I said, all of the data on the profile is meant to be actionable. So we didn't put information. The subcommittee of the Early Childhood Advisory Council that was ultimately the driving factor behind the profiles. They went through lots and lots of discussion and went through a very significant vetting process to find out which data was the most actionable for you to have. Each one of it was intended, each piece of data was intended for you to possibly be able to recognize a pattern and recognize need. You may have other needs that are not shown on the profile. If you have other data sources, for example, all Head Starts conduct a community needs assessment. If you're using that community needs assessment to determine what your needs in your community are, that's fine. You don't have to use the data on the profile. We certainly strongly encourage you to do that. But if you have other data sources that suggest that you have an area of high need that may not be in one of those categories that's on the early childhood profile, that's fine. You just have to express that and thoroughly describe it in your strategic plan so we know that you're responding to a need as noted by the data that you're looking at. And you may want to look at different sources as far as you may want to compare county to county level data. So don't think that because that we have provided the early childhood profiles for you that this is the end of your process. Actually, what I had iterated in the session that I did at the Institute was, honestly, documents like the early childhood profile will never give you all the answers, but it should make you ask better questions. So if you find that you're asking better questions and you need other data to support and find out if you really can get an answer to those questions, that's what we expect, and that's what we strongly encourage. So with that, what we're going to do now is we walk through kind of how to do an analysis using a early childhood profile to recognize that need. And that's a critical factor in submitting a high-quality application. That is that you are addressing a recognized and a need that is supported by the data. I'm going to hand it over to Amanda now, and she's going to walk through, okay, now that we recognize the need, how does that then translate into writing a high-quality strategic plan?
Right. So in Stewart County, our CECC took a look at our data, and we noticed that in the language and communications domain, we were pretty far below the state average. So that's where we thought that might be our greatest area of need. So when we sat down and started thinking about how we want to affect that number and increase the number of children that are ready, we came up with the outcome to increase the number of children that are screened as ready in language and communication by 15% by 2015. I think that's a really good goal for anybody who is thinking about these things. So once you come up with your outcome and you decide that this is something that the CECC can achieve, that's when you start building in the pieces to make that happen. So a couple of strategies that we talked about as the Stewart County CECC were building strong families in the community and professional development. Again, the thing to keep in mind is these are just a couple of examples of what we're looking for you guys to do. So don't think that when you send in your application that we're looking specifically just for building strong families and or professional development. We're looking for several pieces. There's several different things that each community can do. It's up to your community to decide how that should look. So some of the questions that you ask yourself, once you've come up with your outcome, you've decided a couple of different strategies you want to concentrate on, a couple of questions that you want to ask yourself is, what have we done in the past? And how have those strategies been successful and haven't been successful? And how can we make it better for everybody involved? You also want to consider what other partners are doing. Because there are so many groups in these local communities that are doing different things like literacy days and book drives and all of those types of events. It coincides very well with what you're working on in your community. So always keep those things in mind. And you also want to think about what strategies you might be able to work with others. Like what perspective would a superintendent who might think about how to increase the number of children in language and communications, how would they look at it versus how a Head Start director would look at it, so that you're getting that entire group of folks involved. I do have a question here. Hang on one second. The indicator regarding households with non-English language in home, is that statistic just for families with young children or for all families in our county? I'm going to turn that one over to Joe.
I believe that is taken directly from the U.S. Census data. So that's going to refer to all households. So that may not, that's not just an early childhood statistic, but again, you could figure that, you could do a quick correlation, and that is that if there's that number of households, you can probably assume to some degree that there's going to be children under 5 in those households. And I'll tell you another source where you may be able to get that is either your public preschool data. Your public preschool may have that information, or Head Start may have that data because they serve those populations. In particular, if you live in a county that has a migrant Head Start program. So you may want to hook up with your Head Start to find out if you do have a migrant Head Start program. That would be able to provide some more information on that.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions or notice anything that we didn't mention in the profiles before we move on to the next slide? Thank you guys for your questions. They're super great. Keep them coming. So now that we have come up with our need, decided what our outcome is, figured out what strategies we think would work in the community, we've asked ourselves the questions, we've determined how we think we can best move forward, that's when we start thinking about the different activities that you can do. So when you're talking about building strong families, you have a couple of different pieces that you can go for. So you have engagement, where you're going to do the literacy fair or KET's Get Ready programs or Toyota's Born Learning Academy, something where the community will come together to increase strong families as an entire group. Or you have resources that parents can have that they can get from the CECC or from different parts of the community, but not something that's necessarily as together. Books that are great examples of dialogic reading, literacy bags for new mothers that give them books, and the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is also a great resource for that. When you're talking about professional development, and if you look at Stewart County's professional development section of their profile, you'll see that that's kind of lacking. So one of the things that Stewart County thought about was trying to push to make that a little bit better through training on dialogic reading, or really any pre-literacy topics, whether that's phonetic awareness or print-rich environments or alphabet awareness, building vocabulary. All of those pieces come together to enrich a child's experience in early education. Another thing that you may want to do is send out some ASQ questionnaires. We do have some counties that are doing that and have great response with that. Or you may want to purchase QRIS to ensure quality in your community.
So the idea here, and Amanda's, what we're trying to do is show you how all these pieces work together. So showing you how the community needs works together with building your strategic plan. So when you find that need that's out there, in Stewart County's case, they said, okay, we want to affect language and communication. Okay, how do you want to affect it? We want to increase the number of kids that screen ready or ready with enrichments by 15%. Great, you've got your outcome. Now, how are you going to do it? Stewart County said, well, I think we want to try to strengthen families, and we're also going to try to improve professional development of early childhood educators. This is how it all works together and as you are developing your strategic plan, and this is how you should think whenever you're developing your own plan for your own individual county. So that's our idea here, is we're trying to show you how all these pieces work together. Again, let me reiterate with what Amanda's saying. These are just examples. You could go 100 different ways, and we're not trying to be restrictive. What we want to do is just give you an idea of how it might work for how it might work for a council when they're trying to actually build their plan out.
So what we decided once we were looking at all the different things that our community might work in our community, Stewart County decided that a literacy fair would be a great place to start. And again, that professional development, growing that and ensuring that we have high quality educational opportunities for children. So some of the things that that Stewart County thought about putting in their application is to provide books to families. Again, with those literacy bags that you give parents, or maybe have the literacy fair hire a musician for entertainment just to keep folks interested. You print flyers. That's going to be another thing that you spend some money on. Recruit vendors. These are all things that take time. Some of them are going to take money, but it's going to be something to build this literacy fair for something for the community. And again, with the professional development, some of the things that the CECC decided to do was organize a day training for folks specifically focused on language and communication, hire a certified trainer to train during that day, maybe provide space for the folks, and develop the printed material. So these are just examples of what you may think about doing. There are also other resources that you may want to consider that aren't necessarily on our usual bucket list, like working with your county judge to ensure that all public areas are print-rich environments, that there's plenty of literacy stuff there for children, or work with your library to build mobile libraries, help find space for books, help get books for them. We've had some councils that have worked with local restaurants to get information into parents' hands and like children's lunch bags and that sort of thing, or work with your early learning leadership network to build a good professional development program in your county. So to kind of sum up, when you're talking about building your strategic plan, these are some of the questions that you want to make sure that you answer when you're writing it. How will your outcomes be measured? If you are going to have a literacy day, what is your target population to get there? How many folks do you expect to show up? Do we have the correct resources in place to make it work so that it's not all just on one person's hands to make it happen? We work together as a community to make sure that this literacy fair happens. Again, what other resources can we utilize? Are there other groups that you may want to contact to get some volunteers out of, and that sort of thing. And who else has resources that you can use to achieve your outcome? Again, doing the sorts of things, getting out in the community, making sure that they know about your early childhood community and what you can work on.
So Stewart County is almost there. They've done a lot of work. They've gone to the early childhood profile, and they've looked at the patterns in the data. So that's what we've kind of walked through here, right? So Stewart County's gone through that, looked at the patterns in the data, noticed some patterns where they think they might be able to affect some outcomes, but finally chose one and said, you know what? Even though we see that there's low inclusion on the HANDS program, there's this professional development thing over here, what we've decided on for Stewart County is we're going to try to affect language and communication. We want more kids to screen ready or ready with enrichments in language and communication for the next 2-3 years, and we've got a solid goal of increasing that by 15% by 2015. Great. Now we walk through that process of saying, okay, how are we going to do that? What is our strategy going to be? Okay, we selected 2 areas. We selected strengthening families and we selected professional development. Great. Next step is, what are you going to do specifically in those 2 areas in order to affect positive outcome? We're going to do a literacy fair and we're going to do a professional development summit. This is how all these components kind of work together and ultimately result in the final piece, and that is your budget. So your budget then says, well, wait a minute, where do we need to allocate our own resources? Where can we leverage other resources? But how are we going to allocate our own resources in order to make sure that we achieve the outcome that we want? One thing I need to hit too is in that strategic plan, you certainly need to explain or demonstrate that you are going to measure how you're going to make sure that your activities are a success. How do you know if the literacy fair is going to be a success? How do you know if your professional development day is going to be a success? You have to find the appropriate indicator that tells you, are you successful or not? We always try to encourage more meaningful data in that don't just count things. It's not about what you are doing. It's about what, quote unquote, they are learning. So conduct a survey at the literacy fair that asks parents, do you know more about learning and reading with your children than you did before you came? They can fill out that survey, and that becomes how you know if you were successful or not. Same thing with the Professional Development Summit. You could ask early childhood educators, you could say, okay, look, did you learn more about how to appropriately implement literacy strategies in your classroom or in your learning environment? That could have been your measure. So you really need to be explicit on that you identified this need, you addressed an outcome, you selected one outcome you want, you designed this activity, and that you've got a measure for is the activity successful or not. So that's how your strategic plan works. Now then really the budget part should be relatively easy. Your budget narrative is a paragraph as a prose description of how you are going to use the money. So if you're going to use money, for example, to hire a child's musician for the literacy fair, or you purchased Ages and Stages questionnaire, you need to show that in your narrative, and you need to plug it into your narrative that says that this is how we're going to support our activities. And ultimately, everything in your strategic plan also, all the activities that you come up with, all the outcomes and measures that you select, should always say, and we believe that it's going to improve school readiness in our community because of this. So everything ties back to your ultimate goal to school readiness. So your budget then becomes sort of the exercise of plugging in where the money goes. But clearly tie your expenditures to the activities that you defined in your strategic plan. And we are strongly encouraging that you use the template, because we're going to actually aggregate this data into a database so that we can have a little bit more visibility on where expenditures are happening.
And then finally, again, you guys have seen this slide before. We just want to make sure that everybody is up to date. Next Monday, which is less than a week from today, we do need to get those intent to applies in. We have them for most of across the state, but we do still have some that are outlined that we need to get in. Your applications will be due May 15th. So, we're looking at about 5 weeks. Super exciting. And then finally, in June, we're going to be going to ECAC with the funding approval to make sure that you guys get your awards. And then finally, in July, we'll be letting you know how much you'll be getting. So we have about 15 minutes left, and we would love to have a conversation with you guys. Any questions that you might have as far as how all these pieces fit together to create a high-quality application. You can either go to the chat box, which has been really handy, or feel free to speak out if you have anything on your mind.
If you've muted your phone and you're on mute now, you can unmute by doing *6 if you'd like to do that with us verbally. We have while we have a couple folks typing some questions in here too, we want to encourage you that, although we focused on sort of the quality components of the application, so we really wanted to provide a deeper dive. And this was because we heard from you at the Institute. We provided a survey afterwards, and that there were several of you that indicated that you'd like to have a little bit more of a solid example of how to actually put together some of these parts. So we responded to you in focusing on these quality, sort of the quality components of your application, but we understand we can't cover everything. We've always said that when you receive the funding, or when you're writing your application or you submit your application, that's not the end of our relationship with you, that's the very beginning. So Amanda is in place now and stands by to answer any of your questions, so please feel free to use Amanda as a resource as you start to write these for these questions. We really encourage you to submit your questions via email too, because that way we can share that with the larger group, because as we all know, if you're thinking something, there's probably a number of other people that are out there thinking the same thing, or possibly even struggling with the same thing. So what we'll do is we'll put those into our frequently asked questions document, and everybody can reference that as we update it throughout the period of time until the grants are due.
Yes, and if you guys have been keeping up with the toolkit, which I certainly hope you have, you'll probably notice that once a week or so, we're adding about 5 questions. It's happening pretty quickly, and most of the questions that you guys ask us this afternoon are probably going to be added to that. So it's really important that you check in on that toolkit pretty regularly to make sure that we are getting all of your questions answered. And it's probably a good idea to try to start there, because there may have been some other questions that the same question may have been asked previously. So again, you always want to make sure that you're doing that. We're still waiting on a couple of people to type up some questions.
I had a question.
Yes.
Sure.
On your, on a post-survey type questionnaire, is there any suggested number of questions? I know I want to say at the Institute y'all said maybe doing the scales, like a rating scale, but I don't know. I guess I was just wanting to know if y'all had any more details on how to do the post-survey type.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm sorry, could you identify yourself?
Diane Glasscock in Christian County, Region 2.
Great. Thanks for the question, Diane. And yeah, there's always a little bit of a delicate art with surveys, especially when you're sending to parents or you're having parents fill it out. I certainly wouldn't go more than about 3 to 5 questions, but I think it is important for you to allow parents to rate their experience. So don't just say yes or no, or 1 or 2, select 1 or 2. Give them the opportunity to say, for example, if you wanted to gauge on how much they actually learn, you could gauge it on I learned very little, I learned kind of a little bit, or I learned a lot. Give them the opportunity to rate that, because then they're telling you more information rather than yes I learned or no I didn't. It gives you an idea. That you can put that into what's called a Likert scale, and you can actually get some pretty good results out of the aggregate responses to gauge the overall effect that your training did, or your event had on the target population.
And we can add that stuff again to the toolkit. I know that when we did back in January, I think the webinar that we had about achieving outcomes, we talked a lot about how to build a survey with a lot of resources. So I'll make sure that that stuff gets up on the FAQ, or not the FAQ, but the toolkit website, so that you guys will have that accessible to you. We did get one question via the chat box, and it was from your example, are the CECCs to try to do one program or activity based on data instead of looking at doing multiple activities also based on data? I think that depends on your council. If you have the resources to do several activities and do them at high quality, then I think that's absolutely fantastic. What we're trying to get you guys to do is to focus a little bit more on creating high quality activities that will do a lot of good, maybe toward if your resources are only such that you can only do one, but doing that one really, really well, then that's absolutely fantastic. If you think that you can do a high-quality activity, several high-quality activities based on the data that you have, then I think that that will work equally as well. Again, it's all about that quality component.
Yeah, and I'll chime in here too. It's all about moving the needle, folks. We now have a needle. The needle is the composite score that's on the front page of for those of you that have counties that didn't participate in the grants this year, you'll have it next year because it's mandatory next year. But we have a needle. and it's all about moving that needle. So if you adopt a strategy where you're trying to do multiple, that you're doing multiple activities, that you're kind of all over the spectrum, is that going to effectively move the needle, or is having a larger, more focused, more intensive activity or outcome that you're trying to affect, is that going to move the needle? And again, I'll echo what Amanda said. It all depends on your community. But that's where we're ultimately being held accountable, is we want to see that needle move. We want more kids to be ready and ready with enrichments. So develop strategies that, with that end goal in mind, that our end goal is more kids prepared to arrive at kindergarten prepared and ready to take advantage of our learning environments. So that's the ultimate goal. But the answer really is, it depends on your individual community and how you decide to deploy your strategic funds.
I have another question.
Sure.
Diane again. Actually, two questions, but related to the last question, that exact thought about whether you have a single focus or a multiple activity focus. I had that thought last year. I've had it probably several years when writing the grant, and even though I get that logically, and it makes sense that if you're doing a high-quality activities and you have all the outcomes and all that, that it's supposed to, that would be great. But I guess I get this fear that the reviewers will go, wow, you're doing all this stuff and you're dropping a lot of it and just doing this one or two things. And in my head, I think, okay, I know this is what y'all are saying, but are the reviewers going to think, wow, you've certainly dropped the ball because you're not doing all these things?
I mean, we do a really great job at training, or hopefully we'll do a great job training reviewers on specifically what we're looking for, and that is going to be a big piece of the conversation that we have with them, is that it's much more, again, about that quality piece than it is about quantity, making sure that we move that needle forward, not that we have several events that folks can attend.
Yeah, because I did want to do it last year, and I was super afraid that, wow, they'll just go, no, we can't do that.
Sure, and I understand where you're coming from, Diane, and we hear you, and saying that, you know, okay, if we in the past, if we have done all of these things, some of it you may have been using your funding on, and a lot of our applications, CECCs told us that they were doing some of these activities that really weren't even using CEC funds. It was just as part of a collaborative effort. But I can say that the plan for instructing the reviewers is that if you provide a high-quality application that clearly shows that you are addressing a need, that you select an outcome that's going to affect school readiness, and you have a sufficient plan that you can carry that out, and that it's going to be carried out with a high level of quality, there's not a quantity component that we're going to be pressing with our reviewers this year. So they're not looking for 10 or 5 or 6.
Yeah. And I didn't think they would necessarily be looking for it. I just thought if they were comparing to previous years, they would think.
Yeah, no, that's not, a comparison for the previous year is not part of the review process.
Okay. And then my second part of this question, that was part of it, and it's helped because I didn't realize y'all instructed reviewers would be specifically addressing that, and if you do, it might ease my mind a little bit when I'm focusing on what we're going to go for. But the other thing was high impact activities. I remember you saying that a lot at the Institute. Are there, and I realize that it could be different activities for different areas, but are there certain things that tend to be high impact activities that we could think of as jumping off points that would be good things to use?
So for my part, I'll answer it like this, and I would say I would define a high-impact activity that includes, the goal here is to reach every child in every community, right? So high impact for my part, I would say is high impact is defined as reaching as many families and children in your community as absolutely possible. So it's more of a penetration question, is saying, you know, we're reaching the entire community, so it has the opportunity, the activity has the opportunity to be impactful. Let me go back real quick, and if I didn't answer that question sufficiently, we'll throw it back out there, but let me go back real quick before I forget. I highly encourage everybody to look at the request for application and look at the scoring rubric that's in the back of the appendices. That is how your application will, that's how the reviewers will be looking at your application. So take a look at those items as you're designing your strategic plan and you're putting your application together, because that's how we will train. That is the tool that we'll use to train our reviewers when they're actually considering this.
And a really good idea for chairs as far as figuring out what exactly is going to be that high impact thing. Take a look at your surrounding community. Talk to the chairs that are around you. See how they've been working and what they may be able to offer you as far as activities go. Every community is different. You're exactly correct. Every community is different, and a lot of communities, every community is doing some really great things, and some may need support. So it's always really important for you guys to talk to each other and have those conversations so that everybody, again, it's not just on a county level or a service area level, it's on a statewide level. So the more that we can all kind of communicate, the better off we'll be. We do have a question, and what is the definition or difference between ready with enrichments versus ready with supports?
Okay, so there's 3 different levels of readiness. Again, stressing that the only requirement for children to enter kindergarten is their age. All children, if they're age eligible, are quote unquote ready, because that's the only requirement. But the Brigance tool groups into three different categories. So ready with supports is the lowest are children with the lowest level of readiness. So they need more support than ready, and they need less. And ready with enrichments would suggest that that's the highest level of readiness. So if you're thinking about it in those terms, ready with supports is the lowest, quote-unquote, lowest level of readiness. Ready is sort of that average or middle level of readiness, and then ready with enrichments is the highest level of readiness. Guys, great discussion. We really appreciate those of you that spoke up. I know it's kind of hard on a webinar sometimes. I've been on, I can't count how many webinars I've been on, and typically I remain silent myself. So we really appreciate you guys with the questions. We'll have one last call here for questions, I think, and then if that's it, then obviously as you enter into your grant writing process, we stand by as your support. We stand by here to answer questions that you may have, and we'll do our very best to catalog those and share those with everybody.
Looks like we do have a couple more questions being typed in. And again, we do want to say thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to join us this afternoon. Have PowerPoints from the Institute been posted yet? We're slowly getting those PowerPoints in. We have been over the last month or so. So they're continually being added as we get them. So we can send out the link. Amanda may be grabbing it right now if I know her like I think I do, so that you guys can take a look at those PowerPoints. There are also the resources that were part of the round robin are also going to be located as part of that website, so that if you weren't able to attend one or more of the round robin tables that you were really interested in getting to, hopefully that information will be up there as well. Looks like we have one more question being typed.
And it looks like Amanda has posted the link. I think it's a page that we are continually adding to. So bookmark that whenever you visit that site, when you browse that site, bookmark it, because it's going to be updated as we get those PowerPoints in. We'll add them to that page.
And if you, and we are going to be putting this webinar up on YouTube pretty much as soon as we get finished here. By the time we get back to Frankfurt, we'll probably have it up. So, you know, be looking for that link. If you do need to go back and kind of get a refresher course as you're sitting down putting your RFA together, please feel free to check this out. You know, always we're here as a resource. Ask us questions. We will be be there for the rest of the time. If you guys need anything, just let us know.
All right, folks, thank you very much, and be on the lookout. We'll happy grant writing, I guess.